It would appear the broadcast has started. And it looks like our attendee count is growing by the second. So maybe
That's all good.
It's all good. We'll do, let's begin with a few intros, and I see the count is growing on the attendee list in my little window there. But for those who are already on, and for those that are going to continue to join, I'd like to welcome you to what will be the most exciting webinar that you take part in, at least in the next 4 hours. I can't really make that claim, but it will be a wonderful, wonderful webinar, and you're gonna have a grand old time. So my name is Leon Grassi, and I am the Chief Marketing and Business Development Officer here at Sachs LLP. I have with me the very distinguished and amazingly talented and technical Mr. Bob Laurenzo on the line as well. And we're going to have a great conversation with you today around some of the solutions that Bob can bring to market. But what I wanted to do first was kind of introduce the why. And I think that should begin with maybe a little bit of a high level as to the evolution of Sachs and the reason that we're bringing this conversation forward on behalf of our clients, friends, centers of influences, et cetera. And you know, because a lot of people may ask and say up front, okay, so you're hosting a webinar here about compensation, right? Well, why does an accounting firm, historical accounting firm, where does that topic fit into the grand scheme of things for what you do? And I say this during a happy Tuesday and tax season. But I think where it really starts to come full circle for us is let me explain a little bit about the evolution of the firm. So gone are the days of, you know, traditional accounting and tax firms existing as only traditional accounting and tax firms. And I like to think that Sachs has been well out ahead of this curve for some time now, but especially over the course of the last couple of years, where that evolution has really hit its stride. And what that means is that we've been focusing more and more on really becoming consultants and advisors and business people with expertise in accounting, and not necessarily the other way around. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's primarily due to the fact that we exist in an industry where that change is happening at the highest level. So if we look at the big four, the top 10 firms across the country, we're seeing a lot of that evolution take place, where they're really becoming more consultative and advisory based in their approach to business. But even more so for us, we're sort of in this Goldilocks zone where we are the right size organization, where we have the resources, enough resources at our size to be able to provide that real advisory and consulting to our clients, where normally they wouldn't know where else to get it from. While at the same time, we have the ability to provide that level of service to the smaller businesses in the industry, right, that may potentially require those services, but also really don't know where to go. So we pride ourselves with always having been the first call for a lot of our clients with regards to any number of issues that affect their business. And these days, as a result of that evolution and the way that these firms are changing and evolving, is that we've really brought on the services and the resources to be able to offer real consulting services around virtually every need that you may have in your business, you know, with regards to any of those challenges. Segue into this introduction that we are making. So very often we are asked by our clients about issues affecting them from an HR perspective and a payroll perspective, and you know, we get benefits questions quite a bit, and any number of things, technology, et cetera. And what we want to do is make sure that our clients are educated as far as what value we can provide and the resources that we can bring to bear on their behalf. So Bob and Decusoft represent one of those resources, and a very strategic one that we can potentially bring to bear. And I will say that Bob and I have known each other for 15 years, 15, 16 years. He is a dear friend and a mentor of mine, and we wanted to do this and put this together as a way to showcase our respective businesses, but you know, also to showcase the value that Decusoft can bring to our clients. So Bob, what I'm going to ask you to do, if you don't mind, is give us a little insight into the brief history of how Decusoft came to be, a high level of kind of the solution that you can bring to market. And guys, I hope those on the line don't mind. We don't like slides and background noise. We're going to have a conversation. That's really the way that this is going to flow. We're going to have questions back and forth. My coordinator, Alex Celentano, is on the line. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the question feature in GoToWebinar to ask those questions. Alex will then pass them over to us. But anyway, Bob, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about Decusoft, and then we can kind of get into a little conversation there.
Perfect. First and foremost, thanks, Leon, for having me, and thanks everyone for taking time today. We started out, the history of Decusoft, we started out a long time ago, 2002, as originally as an application development shop. The name Decusoft is derived originally from developers of custom software. And we were introduced into the HR space by a customer who was a compensation professional who was charged with basically creating a custom software around compensation for a major real estate holding company that had invested over 7 figures in a solution from one of the big providers. And after they went live, they quickly realized that the solution did not meet their unique and specific needs. And they brought this gentleman in who had a lot of technical acumen, and he had a product that he couldn't really get across the finish line. And he asked us to help from an application development perspective. With that, we quickly saw that there was a need in the marketplace for a solution that was more configurable, more flexible than some of the, what we call a suited solution, which are the big players that offer many different components of HR, not just compensation. So we saw that there was a need. We developed what is now Compose. And since that time, it has evolved substantially since that time, which was around 2007, to where we are today. Compose is a secure cloud-based compensation management and analytics software platform. What does that mean in English? It basically means we help customers automate all facets of executive compensation, things like equity, merit, bonus, deferrals, all types of way people are compensated and paid today, rather than do it either in Excel, which, believe it or not, a lot of companies still do, or they piggyback us to one of the solutions that some of you may be familiar with, like a Workday, an Oracle, a UKG, et cetera. And that's really the evolution of where we started to where we are today.
Bobby, it's funny that you bring up Excel. And, you know, we had, again, I've known your organization for some time, but we had a conversation not that long ago. And, you know, to know where your beginnings are and to kind of how you got your start, I found it borderline astounding to know that there are some organizations that we all would know that we consider very successful that are at a certain tenure in their existence that are literally using an Excel spreadsheet, right, to accomplish the solution that you guys can bring. Again, I found it a little bit staggering, but talk a little bit about that. Like, how prevalent is that? I mean, is that still a relatively common thing?
I'm going to say 90-something% of our customers continue to use Excel, either solely before they come to us, or they still use it because, let's face it, every new hire, the younger generation is very familiar with Excel. And a lot of the controllers and the managing directors and the executives, the finance folks, are very, very intimately familiar with Excel. So the question is, we either replace Excel or the reliance on Excel, but it really never kind of goes away. What we try and do is eliminate all the risks that are associated with Excel. And if you want me to touch upon some of them, I can, because there's a ton of them.
Yeah, and I don't want the Microsoft gods to strike us down. I'm not saying, you know, Excel isn't a great tool, but no. I think for the purposes of running, you know, an enterprise-ready, right, comp solution for an organization, I would imagine that Excel is not the right play here, right? So it definitely the risks associated.
Excel, it was never really derived to be a enterprise-wide solution, but it has a ton of functionality that people continue to use. But the benefits of going to a cloud-based solution opposed to dealing with Excel, first and foremost, is security. There's a ton of issues with sending compensation data and information on spreadsheets. You have issues of version control. The administration, the time spent is very, very inefficient. You know, we've had customers that start with Excel. By the time their compensation process starts, it can take nearly 8 weeks. And then after they automate it, they bring it down to 2 weeks, because think about it. You're sending a spreadsheet out to all of your constituents. They make changes to the spreadsheet, send it back. Someone keeps a master copy. Someone then has to make sure the version is controlled. You have to make sure there's no formula errors. It's just a very, very inefficient process, and it just, lacks security. The other thing is the version control, because a lot of times we've seen issues where someone thought they had a master copy, someone made a change, the wrong copy is sent out, and it just quickly can become a nightmare. But the biggest thing is the administration time. I think there are statistics out there. Organizations spend 70% of their time just, preparing, checking, and waiting on data, and about 20 or 30% of the time analyzing the data. That ratio should be the opposite because of the inefficiencies. So that's kind of the benefits of going to automate things. The other big thing is you can't audit Excel. So in a web-based system, you can tell who made a change, and you can have an audit trail, which is huge. So those are really some of the highlights of the drawbacks of Excel. But again, it's not going away. We just dramatically reduce the reliance on it as a tool.
And Bob, if you could, I'll just put it out there. Excel obviously is a very, widespread and popular and readily available tool and platform, which I'm sure has a lot to do, and easily customizable, which I'm sure has a lot to do with why it was the sort of de facto. It's also easy, right? So, when a lot of people hear software, sometimes it's like, oh, great, another platform that I have to use. So how does Decusoft address that with Compose with regards to, how easy Excel is to use, if that's really the quote unquote competitor that you're up against, right?
So it's a good question. The way we designed Compose is to look and feel a lot like Excel. So we have a comp grid, which is the main page you go to in Excel. And if you were to look at it, 99% of you would say, oh, this is like an Excel grid. The gentleman I referred to who wrote the product originally for the real estate holding company did that by design, because he knew people were going to be migrating off of Excel. And one of the biggest compliments we can get from new users is that the user adoption is easy, and it was actually more efficient and just an easier version of a cloud-based Excel. The only difference is you can't gain access to changing formulas. We lock the formulas down so that you eradicate errors and things like that, and again, just mitigate the risk. So we give you the best of both worlds coming off of Excel.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Bobby, so Saks here, if I look at what our customer base looks like historically, we do very well in the construction, real estate, nonprofit industries, manufacturing and distribution, consumer products, and a lot in healthcare, among others. But those are really the strong niches that we've catered to for some time now. And a lot of the organizations, because we are, again, even though we are really an advisory and consultative based firm, our primary points of contact within most of those organizations are CFOs and controllers. So talk to me a little bit about if you are a CFO of an organization that we may cater to here at Saks that happens to be on the line today. Who do you normally engage on these conversations, and why would or should a CFO care, or a controller about managing the compensation program?
So
what about that?
So our target audience is predominantly the HR and the total rewards team within a organization, as well as the finance team, especially in financial verticals and other verticals. A lot of times the financial team is working closely with HR. As you can imagine, they're looking for data and trying to get accurate data so they can do scenario planning and things like that. So it's typically the finance individuals, the CFO, the COO, and the head of comp or total rewards, or the head of HR. That predominantly is our audience. The reason why finance would care is, again, because of, if I had to put my finger on, I'm going to say security. Leon, we've had instances with some of our customers have shared with us that spreadsheets have gone out to international affiliates that were multi-tab spreadsheets that had sales, comp, and information on people's payrolls, their bonuses, their total reward statements. Everything was supposed to be password protected by tab. And lo and behold, they found out that it was not password protected, and it was too late to recall. There's also been instances where customers have come to us after They have had overpayments or underpayments of bonuses and compensation due to changes in formulas that they did not know about through the version control. So all of those things would, to me, cause headaches and concern for a CFO. And those are some of the things that we remediate. And the biggest thing is the time inefficiency with Excel in the process. Think about cutting a cycle time by 70 or 80% from 8 weeks to 2 weeks. Those are some of the key attributes to why CFOs and the finance people would be interested in migrating to a platform like Compose.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so we, as I mentioned, those industries that I kind of referred to earlier, is there specific industry or vertical expertise that you guys have? Is there a certain marketplace that makes more sense, or maybe, what's the right size organization to engage with you guys?
So I'll answer that a couple of ways. The main determinant is what complexities are you dealing with in your compensation now? What pain points do you have with either Excel, or if you're using a PEO or a homegrown solution? What issues are you facing now? Have you had any security issues? Have you had any errors or issues around any of those? In terms of the size of companies, it really doesn't matter. We have companies from 100 to 30, 40,000. The main determinant is how complex are your plans, what issues are you facing, and what pain are you enduring and going through, where you can either eliminate risk or gain efficiency. Another thing we haven't talked about, Leon, is the fact that nowadays you can't get away from talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and our platform has analytics built in. So a lot of the HR folks are having to extrapolate information from comp, send it to finance and other folks to see if they have any issues, would it be with either pay gaps, pay discrepancies, any inequities between ethnicities, male, female, geographical. All that stuff is very, very hard to do when you have disparate systems. So another benefit and consideration with automating into a comp platform.
That's a really, really good point. So let me ask maybe a similar question, but in a different way. So Bobby, you mentioned PEO before, right? And I'm sure that there's a lot of people out here are getting phone calls, I'm sure pretty consistently, from PEOs and from organizations. My question to you is that, how does this solution play in the sandbox, right? With a lot of the other solutions that may be in the marketplace. I realize there isn't necessarily a direct competition, but let me ask that too. Like, is there someone that claims to do this, and how do you play in the sandbox with all those other solutions?
A lot of our customers will have a PEO, but they don't have what's an HCM solution like a ADP or a Workday or a UKG. So they'll just add Compose to manage their comp. And then you have the companies that have the full-blown HCM solutions that also add Compose. We play very well with the PEO. We'll just handle the heavy lifting around comp and then feed the comp data into their payroll provider to handle the bonuses, the merit, the total rewards, the compensation statements, and things like that, which is another discussion we can get into, Leon, in terms of what's happening today with the Great Resignation, the issue with labor, the high turnover, and some of the other benefits tied to how to communicate rewards to employees to attract and retain them.
Yeah, it's funny, you bring that up, and there is a question that I'm going to address in a second, but you bring up some of the trends in the marketplace, and I think it's a good segue to kind of have a little bit of that conversation too, which is that we're all very, very well aware of the human capital issues that are affecting the marketplace today, and a lot of the challenges that are at play. And you've brought up the point of data and disparate systems many times, and while I wouldn't say that that's as buzzwordy in the marketplace as some of the other issues we're dealing with, I do think it's a lot of other problems are stemming from that disparate technology background, system, et cetera. And a lot of the human capital issues can potentially be improved and or affected by streamlining these processes. So I do think that there's a variable there when we look at what's going on in the marketplace. Tanya is asking if we're going to see any samples or any type of demo in the actual system itself. We didn't schedule, or we didn't discuss having a live demo as of today, Tanya, and for those others that are on that might be wondering. The idea here was really to talk a little bit about a high level of what Compose can do in the follow-up. So we are going to send out the recording afterwards. And in the follow-up, there will be instructions on how to follow up for a proper demo. But Bobby, maybe if we can, for Tanya's benefit and maybe for some of the other people on the line, maybe if you can share some, I don't know, I don't want to say case study, but maybe some high level examples. And I know you may not be able to reference client names, but sort of talk about how they approached you, the problems that they were facing, and then maybe how the solution solved that problem. That might be helpful for
Yeah,
Tanya.
sure.
Again, we can always follow up, Tanya, and those on the line for actual demo of the platform.
Yeah, so a lot of times customers will find us, a lot of our business comes as referrals from satisfied customers, and they know their peers are experiencing similar issues and they refer themselves to us. Believe it or not, we get referrals also from those human capital providers that know their own solution has some shortcomings, and I call it like a co-opetition type relationship, but we work closely with Workday and UKG as well. So to answer your question, I'll give you the example, most recent example. We had a customer in the financial vertical space that managed a very, very complicated and complex spreadsheet scenario for their various executives and employees. I think they had over 60 versions of disparate spreadsheets. They had international employees as well as US-based employees. And their comp cycle would typically, they'd start taking recommendations for bonuses and merit increases and things like that in September and October. They would then send spreadsheets out to the various HR business partners throughout the US and abroad. And that process from start to finish, by the time they got through the iterations of the budget pool and the recommendations, sending spreadsheets back and forth, literally would take 8 to 10 weeks. We then took their systems, put it into Compose, and their first cycle, it took them less than 3 weeks to do what took them 8 weeks. So that's one case scenario. And the other reason that some folks have come to us is because there's been just either a security issue or a mistake found in spreadsheets. I don't know what the stats are. Again, I don't want Bill Gates or the Excel gods to come, strike us down with thunder. But if you look out there on Google, there's something like 83 to 90% of spreadsheets have some type of error, especially ones that have been used over time. The other thing is that typically firms have, I could have probably answered one of your earlier questions better about the finance folks, one of the concerns, but a lot of times one person is the keeper or the master to that spreadsheet. And if something happened to that individual, it puts that company at risk as one single point of failure to the keys to the kingdom relative to the formulas and the background and the history into the origins of that spreadsheet. So that's another reason why you want to go to a centralized, platform. The bigger thing is just wasting the time for managers in terms of time and money. The administration time is really ridiculous with managing spreadsheets and that whole process. So if you cut the time down by 70 to 80%, it's very easy to do an ROI.
Yeah, it's fairly significant. We have another question that came through, Bobby. I believe this is directed towards you, but I can answer it as well. I believe this is Shariah, if I'm reading this properly. Do you have any clients in the environmental consulting industry?
Who would that be? Environmental consulting. I'm trying to think. I'm not sure. Okay. Give me an example of a company. I'm not sure that we do. Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can say we do. I don't know whether or not this is a client of ours or not, but we do. And what I'll say as a response to that question specifically, and we kind of touched on this pretty lightly here, Bobby, earlier, is that I don't know that there is necessarily a specific industry where Decusoft plays more than another, or isn't necessarily a viable solution, right? I mean, if you can maybe rehash this for those that joined late, give us a better idea of what's the right matrix, right? Where does it make the most sense, regardless of industry?
Really, the ideal customer for us is someone that is having a difficult time managing their comp the way they're doing it now. Regardless of what vertical you're in, you will find consistencies and some expertise within a particular vertical. For example, we have some legal customers. We have a lot of financial customers. And the one thing we like to say with our team is once you've seen one, you've seen one. Because believe it or not, even though there are similarities in terms of paying bonuses and things like that, everyone is a little bit special to a certain degree. So the bottom line is, even if we did not have any environmental specialty customers as we speak, the key is tell me what your pain points are, what you're doing now, and we will show you on a demo to see if we can help you. So there's really more similarity than how people manage comp broadly than how they do it in a vertical kind of expertise. It just so happens that we'll tend to get referrals. Once we get one financial customer, others will refer us in that space. So I hope I answered the question, but bottom line is show me what issues you're having, and then we'll be very candid if we can help you and you think there's a cost benefit to pursuing a solution or not.
Yeah, and Bobby, maybe you can use that. There's another question that I'll get to in a sec, but maybe you can use that as sort of a segue into, because a lot of times the question of customization comes up. To your point, there isn't really one, there isn't one model that helps everyone. So as far as the tool's concerned, is there a level of customization that's provided? And then maybe you can talk a little bit about what the onboarding process looks like too, so that people can get more comfortable with what that looks like.
So in terms of customization, that's a bad word. So we started out as a custom development shop. The reason why that's a bad word, all kidding aside, is because when you're buying a solution, when you have customization, it means that almost every one of our customers could have a separate instance of how Compose works for them. And that, for us, makes it difficult to scale. And for a customer, every time we do a new version release or an upgrade, we have to make sure that whatever customization we had for that particular customer works in the new environment. So it gets complicated. So the benefit of what we've done, taking our 20 plus years of experience, is we recently came out with a new version of our software that features what I'm going to call a no-code, low-code type of approach, which all that means is that we took all of our expertise from those 20-something years and we tried to make the solution from an implementation perspective less reliant on developers and more reliant on business analysts and implementation consultants, so that we took all the nuances from all of our customers, put it into a pot, and came up with a solution that will handle 90% of the way they were doing things uniquely in a way that allows us to scale and allows them to maybe get, instead of 100% of the functionality they wanted, 75 or 80% of the functionality, but still meets their needs, but in a scalable, affordable way. As far as the second part to your question, the onboarding, one of the other benefits of the no-code, low-code release that we had is the fact that our implementation went down substantially. We went from 4 to 6 months of an implementation time frame to 6 to 8 weeks. Why is that important? A, it mitigates risk, and it's substantially less expensive to implement the solution because of the time. Would that answer your question or confuse you more?
No, I mean, I think it does. Well, Shariah was great to respond that you definitely answered her question prior. How many key stakeholders are normally involved in that implementation process, Bobby? I think that's maybe a good question.
That's a great question, Leon. And again, that depends on the size of the company. So when we're dealing with an enterprise company, as you can imagine, there can be 10 to 12 players involved. You have people from HR, finance, procurement, the data side of the house, or IT, the security side of the house. In the mid-sized firms, it's typically, I'm going to say 3 to 5. You have your head of HR / head of comp and your finance folks as well. And then we're always going to interact with IT because we often take historical data. One of the benefits of Compose is that we can take snapshots of 3 to 5 years history. So if you want to show an employee at the end of the year saying, this is a snapshot of your total reward package for 2020, 21, 22, 23, and they can see the trends, the percent increase. They can see some of the components that, such as the value of their benefits and things like that, because we didn't touch upon the total reward statements. Maybe we can touch upon that later, but with the high turnover and some of the things happening in the marketplace, we found the need. A lot of customers are asking us about how we do total reward statements and communicating to their employees more often, so they don't lose employees to $10,000 or $20,000 increases when they jump ship to grass is always greener scenario, where they look at their compensation and get a better understanding of how they're really being compensated.
I took that note, and I do want to get back to it. And Rocky, I'm going to get to your question in a second, although I think we're covering some of it throughout the answers of all of these. But so, Bobby, we spent a lot of time together in the IT services industry. Saks here has an IT services arm of the organization as well. So I'm going to ask an IT related question, because you touched on it briefly, which is, are there, a lot of people wonder this, are there IT implications to bringing Compose into the, you mentioned that it's cloud-based, but are there any implications that an organization has to worry about from an IT perspective?
The biggest, obviously, is security. So that's their biggest concern. So we are a cloud-based system. So as you can imagine, we take security extremely, a very, very cautious and rigorous approach to our security standards. We maintain the highest degree of security that's humanly possible. We routinely handle, SSO, two-factor authentication. We have high availability solutions. We are SOC compliant. We have audits. We have proactive monitoring. And all of the IT companies give us a DDQ, which is a due diligence questionnaire, security questionnaires. It's part of our standard protocol. In our subscription agreements, there's a whole bunch of issues around liability, around security. That's usually their biggest concern, Leon. And all vendors are going to have to be up on their security, but you'd be surprised when we get audited in terms of the security. It's a huge factor. It's probably the number one concern.
Yeah, and it should be, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. We deal with it, very often, and obviously you can imagine in our landscape. To address, so Rocky Vienna had a question with regards to explaining some specific efficiencies and key differentiators. Now, I don't want to say, Rocky, we've covered all of that, but I think throughout the answering of a lot of the questions that we've covered, we definitely talked a little bit, but maybe, Bobby, if you can summarize, maybe give us your UVP, your unique value proposition, because, and again, I think it's important that you kind of call this out, is that there isn't really anyone in the landscape that does this piece. You're kind of competing against a spreadsheet most of the time, right? So the differentiators are security and, efficiency, et cetera, but maybe you can just kind of answer that in summation, right? If you were to tell Rocky what differentiators are.
The biggest thing is we help save time and money managing compensation, and we significantly mitigate risk. So Leon, you're right. It's hard to compete against Excel unless there's a specific pain point that someone is feeling or there's been an issue. So we save time and money, we mitigate risk, and we compete with other best-of-breed solutions out there. And again, it's the way we support our customer. It's the way we have knowledge about Compose. So a lot of times customers will come to us thinking, this is the way we do it today. Yep. This is the way we think we want to do it. And then they talk to our implementation consultants and they say, other customers have had that challenge, and this is what we've done for them. And might you not consider that? Because when you're implementing a new system, that's the time to fix everything and kind of start fresh. So a lot of it has to do with, we differentiate ourselves based on the experience of our team, and our software is really, really highly configurable and flexible and very, very intuitive and easy to use.
I think that's a great summation. We have a wonderful question from Keisha Kennedy. What kind of customer support comes with Compose? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yep. So we have a very, very high-touch customer support model, and that's what one of our differentiators has always been. When you're dealing with a big provider, the last thing we want to do is have you call a 1-800 support hotline. we find that to be inefficient for a couple ways. Number one, you're never dealing with someone who's not intimately familiar with your compensation plan types. So what we typically do is we assign an implementation consultant, a lead consultant, and then we have a team behind that person. So obviously we have failover and you're not just dealing with one person. And then we have an online ticketing system. So if there's support, you have a ticketing system online, and you also have access to your team members throughout the implementation timeline. So we have a very personalized support. And again, we pride ourselves on making the software very intuitive and easy to use. But once you go through that first comp cycle, the learning curve is usually a lot easier in subsequent cycles. But especially during that first one, we have a very high touch model that enables you to quickly get in touch with someone should you need help. We also have an LMS system, an online learning management system, which highlights some of the key benefits and questions should you get stuck. If you have an international affiliate that you're supporting at 11:30 midnight and you get stuck, sometimes the online tool can help you as well. So we give you a multitude of options versus having to call a 1-800 number and be stuck.
That's awesome. So let me get to the inevitable question that I'm sure is on everybody's mind, and then you can answer this as transparently as you'd like. But talk a little bit about how does the pricing model work for something like this? So maybe give some detail. And I know that there's probably a lot of variables associated, but what can you share with those that are on the line?
Yeah, we typically, just like most of the software companies in our space, in the B2B SaaS space, like them, we charge based on two factors. Number one is the employee count, and number two is the degree of complexity relative to the compensation plan or the number of plans we're going to implement on your behalf. So typically we enter into a 3-year agreement. That 3-year agreement is predicated on the SaaS, which is the software as a service. So you have 500 employees. Your SaaS is, hypothetically, $30,000 a year for each year. And then there's a one-time implementation fee, which is predicated on the complexity, the frequency of the comp plan, the type, and if we're doing reward statements and things like that. That's basically how we come up with the pricing. And honestly, we're never the least expensive. We're never the most expensive. Traditionally, we're kind of somewhere in the middle, but we're pretty flexible, predicated on how well we think we meet your needs, and we will try and be flexible and work with folks as best we can.
That's great to hear. And again, there's so many variables. I wanted to keep it general because there are so many variables when it comes to pricing and structure, and it's no different really than when you're dealing with a professional services firm like us. What I will say, and this is me taking a minute to just endorse Bob himself and the organization and the folks that he works with. And I'll draw a parallel to the team that surrounds me here at Saks, is that these guys are not myopic in their focus. They're not a one-trick pony, so to speak. So while compose and compensation happens to be the solution that they center on, they are really solid business advisors, and their focus is really to see the big picture, understand that big picture, and then ultimately develop a solution that makes the most sense for your business, your needs specifically, and ultimately how you go to market. It's like I said, it's no different than how Saks deals with our own clients, right? If we understand the big picture and not only the challenges, but also the objectives, then it makes it easier for us to kind of ultimately deliver that to you. So, Bobby, I said I was going to go full circle because I took the note down on total reward statements. So we didn't just in on that. So maybe I'll give you a couple minutes to chat about that specifically.
Great minds think alike, because I was just going to remind you. So with what has happened, started with, I think, with COVID and the fact that it really changed the dynamics of the workplace. A lot of people started, as you know, working from home. We're still in an environment where a lot of us work from home and/or some sort of hybrid model, which is 2 to 3 days a week, depending on what industry. And that really changed things a lot for us, actually for the better, in my opinion. Number one, it changed with a lot of turnover that's happened as a result of that. It changed the frequency of payments to employees. So compensation used to be, in a lot of our employees, a one-time annual process, whether it be a merit increase at the end of the year. But what happened is a lot of our employers started paying folks more frequently, whether that be monthly, quarterly, as ways to incent folks to stay. And the other thing that came out of that was what we call total reward statements. So a lot of, I'd say about a 60 to 70% increase in the demand for total reward statements as a result of COVID. What is a total reward statement? It's simply taking a snapshot of someone's aggregate employee package. It's their compensation, it's their bonus, it's their merit increase. If they have deferral of income, if they have vesting schedules in a 401k or other funds that they're tied to, it's the value of their benefits, it's the value of paid time off. Seeing that on one document or a letter or a series of documents allows a manager to communicate that with an employee. And a lot of industries have used that, especially when someone, gets a employment offer from a competing firm and says, hey, I'm going to leave. I got a $20,000 bump to jump ship. And then when you study the aggregate picture, the value of the benefits, the value of the 401k, the match, and everything else, it's actually more beneficial for that employee to stay, but no one ever had the tool to communicate that effectively to a customer, to an employee. So we've seen a huge increase in what we call total rewards or communication letters around their compensation.
That's awesome. You have a lot of conversations with folks in the HR space, in the industry in general. I wonder if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of your insight based on your experience of kind of, I don't know, I'm not asking you to have a crystal ball here, Bobby, but like, what does the future of your game look like, right? What are some concerns that you see maybe on the horizon, in either the composition, the comp space in general, or maybe just some of the industries you cater to?
I just think that compensation is going to continue to happen more frequently. It continues to evolve with the different types: sales compensation, executive compensation. It's constantly changing, and the better we can make an employee experience for our customers, meaning help that customer realize that their employees are valuable, and the more tools that you can give them to show them that they are valued, make it easy for them to get the data, will help minimize the turnover. At the end of the day, people work to get paid, right? They're not doing it out of the benevolence of their heart. So they're working to get paid to provide for their family. And it's really important with all the turnover and some of the things that are happening in the economy and things like that, that we provide tools for our customers to provide a good user experience for the administrators of the system and to help them do whatever they can to keep their employees happy and feel appreciated. I see consolidation of systems happening to avoid, a lot of these companies have a ton of disparate systems that they have to manage. So I see a lot of consolidation of systems happening. A perfect example is we had to incorporate dashboard, diversity, equity, inclusion into our product because customers were saying, Bob, I'm taking your data, exporting it into another tool, massaging it, and then bringing it to finance or back into your data. So our customers told us,
right.
And what did we do? We listened to them and built it in. Are there going to be other touch points that we build into the product? Like, some of the talent components, some of the other. Another thing is benchmarking of salaries. How do we know what to pay people? There's a whole myriad of benchmarking tools and things out there. Are we going to partner with companies like that, incorporate some of that? Many of those things that lead to better employee experience and some of these systems that are kind of similar are eventually going to come together, and hopefully we'll be at the forefront of that. The whole digital transformation, let's face it, anything that you can automate and makes better and easier experience for both our customers and employees is just something that we're going to have to stay ahead of.
I think that's a fantastic point as far as digital transformation, because we see it all day, every day, and it has such tremendous impacts across an organization. I want to advocate for a second too on similarly to how I talked about how we're in a little bit of a Goldilocks zone with regards to the size of the firm, but I believe that Decusoft is in that space as well. And I say that having previously been at a very, very large software provider, right? Where I used to work at a global software company. And I will say that, being able to get to a key decision maker within that organization, if you're a customer, is virtually impossible. Whereas, I believe that at Decusoft that you guys run an operation in such that you're willing to take customer feedback and actually implement that feedback and make and have clients make recommendations and actually take that recommendation to market to bear. And I think that's a really unique thing about Decusoft, the size that you guys are, but also about just the culture of how you run your organization. So again, I think it's a testament to how you operate. But I got to believe that you're listening to your clients a lot more than we were at my previous software.
Yeah, our roadmap is more than 50% driven by customer feedback. After every implementation we do, we solicit feedback, and before there are subsequent cycles, whether it's quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, we're monitoring what we could have done better and making adjustments. But literally, the product team would probably shoot me for saying 50%. It's probably more 70% of our roadmap is based on what we get from user feedback and user groups. And also, we have a very good relationship. Dan, who runs our marketing, and I work closely with a lot of the thought leaders and the HR analysts in the marketplace. They share things with us as well, and they are a sounding board for us too, to share with us things that make sense to build into the roadmap as well. So those two things help us shape what we're doing a lot.
That's awesome.
How are we doing for time, Leon? Are we okay?
Yeah, we got about 10 or so minutes left. So, obviously, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. But while they're doing that, Bob, if you wouldn't do me the favor of, let's take this back again to your introduction as well, and just talk a little bit about the resources at the organization, just so people have a better understanding of, what Decusoft looks like, how many people you have, and, kind of the size of the organization, and share a little bit about that roadmap that you just mentioned.
Yeah, we have, our organization is devised into, we have sales and marketing. Obviously, you have management, then you have sales and marketing. And the real important part is, I won't say this too loud because they may want pay increases, but we have our engineering team, our product team, and then we have our services team. And those three are the most important. So the product team is in charge of the roadmap. The engineering team is in charge of maintaining the current product code and also making the magic happen of taking the guidance from what the product team envisions and draws out. They bring it forth into reality. And then the services team is super, super important. They have the implementation consultants that are the interface to the customer. They take the customer's plans and convert that into Compose. So those really are the three main driving forces behind the product.
And Bob, you guys are in Ramsey, New Jersey, in Bergen County. Would you say most of your clients are regional or local to you? Where does that make up, or are you national in scope?
We have customers all over the United States and world, for that matter. Almost half of our customers have international affiliates that we support through Compose. So we have customers, most of our customers are headquartered in the United States, but many of them have international affiliates that we support through Compose, which is why another security issue, if your audience is familiar with, is the GDPR. And we are as compliant as GDPR as you can be, given that it changes every month.
It certainly does.
Right.
Listen, Bob, I think that was a really wonderful summation and sort of recap on what Decusoft provides and the Compose solution. And again, if anyone has any more questions that they want to drop in the remaining minutes that we have, feel free to do so. We can kind of hang on here for minutes to see if anything comes up. But first and foremost, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us and talk a little bit about your organization and your solution. I like to do these often, and again, it really, the value that we provide to our clients here at Saks is really compounded by folks like yourselves, right? We are advisors to our clients, we are consultants to our clients, and that isn't always just about the services that we can provide in-house. It's about the services that we can bring to bear on their behalf, and the value that those resources have to those clients and their organization. And I think that yours is certainly a compelling one. It's one that we hear about quite a bit in our daily activities, having conversations with our clients. And it's interesting because if you look at how we've always existed, and I mentioned earlier that we cater largely to, CFOs and controllers are usually our primary contacts, but more and more we're having conversations with other folks within an organization. Historically, a traditional accounting firm would not engage with and have conversations with, and I think that represents the future of where we're headed as an organization. But it opens up opportunities for like us, Bob, to work together and do what we know is right for our clients and bring really solutions to them. So
yeah, Leon, we always look to partner. We have compensation consultants that refer us. We want to differentiate ourselves from our competitors so that we're not just, look, at the end of the day, everyone knows we want to sell software, but we also want to be consultative and bring value-added services to our customers so that we're experts not only in the software, but also in the trends as it relates to compensation, so that we can share what some of our other customers are doing for other customers to benefit from.
Absolutely. So I appreciate that. So yeah, let's wrap. I don't see any other questions that have come through. We're giving people like 8 minutes back in their day, which is lovely. Again, thank you. Our follow-up is going to be for those that were on, and for those who are watching this as a recording after the fact. We're going to follow up with the recording, and then with that follow-up will be details on how to reach out and engage Bob and or myself in a follow-up conversation, and how to get that demo that a few folks have asked about and see a sample of the software itself. So stay tuned for further instructions. But Bob, thank you again. I really appreciate your time, and I love it. The stuff is great, and I hope everyone enjoyed themselves and took away something educational today. So thank you, everyone.
Leon, thanks very much, and thanks to everyone who spent some time with us today. Much appreciated.
No problem. Thanks, guys. There will be follow-up in the emails.
Thank you.